Welcome to JA Economics for Success, session Planning for My Future Income. For this lesson, you will need the following materials. You will need your volunteer guidebook, the student table tents, and the two student worksheets for this lesson. One is titled Planning for My Future Income, and the other one is titled The 100% Game. You will also need access to the digital presentation being shared on screen right now. You can get that at learn.ja.org. You can work with the classroom teacher to determine whether you or the teacher will be responsible for pulling up the digital presentation each time you visit the classroom. We recommend asking the teacher to have the presentation ready for you if possible. If you are teaching a JA in the AM or a JA in a day event, we will encourage your classroom teachers to have the presentation pulled up for you if possible before you get to the classroom. To aid in preparation and facilitation, you will see in your guidebook blue text boxes, which contain JA of South Dakota session-specific teaching tips, and yellow text boxes that include vocabulary terms and presentation content that's not already in the guidebook. When you get into the classroom, please greet the students and tell them a bit about yourself and why you chose to volunteer in their classroom. If this is your first visit with students, if this is not your first visit with students, please redistribute their table tents as needed and remind them of what they learned in the previous lesson. As you progress through the slideshow using the next or the back arrows, so we're just going to go forward here, you're going to come to the lesson objective slide. Please read through these with the students as they emphasize what students should know or be able to do by the end of this lesson. Then hand out the first of the two worksheets, which is the one that has room for definitions on it, titled Planning for My Future Income. Please hand that out or have a student help you hand those out to everyone in the class. This will be used to take notes for the next few slides. As you advance through the slides, please notice that many of the slides, especially the vocabulary slides, are interactive. You can choose to have a student come up to the board to click and reveal the definition of each of the words, like so, just clicking on the vocabulary card. Or before they do that, you can have students turn and talk to each other and think about what the word might mean, and then turn and share that meaning with a shoulder partner before they share it with the whole class. The choice is yours. Please allow students a few extra seconds to write down the definitions of each of the vocabulary words as you talk about their meaning. Please note to students that they do not have to write word for word the definition on their worksheet, that they are allowed to paraphrase the meaning of the word and write that instead. That is totally okay, but please give them a few seconds to do so before advancing to the next vocabulary word or slide. As we move forward, the following slide has a prompt for the students to think about, and you will also see three implementation options at the bottom of the slide right over here. For our JA of South Dakota volunteers, we are only focusing on the financial literacy parts of the lesson, which means we need to select option 3 each time we see it as an option in our slideshow. So option 3 is over here. It says option 3, and then it has, you'll see the symbol of the piggy bank, and it's on an orange button. So once I'm done with the slide, I need to click that, and it will take me to the slide that's called the price is variable. Now, if you happen to click the wrong button or the wrong option, that's okay. You're not lost forever. All you need to do is come up to the top left-hand side, and you see this menu button. You're going to select it, and then you need to find the next slide, which is the price is variable. So you just use the mouse and you can scroll. So you can see we skipped over all of these slides because that's not part of the lesson that we are teaching. And then just to get to that slide, you just select it like so. And then to get the menu to go away, you just click the 3 bars at the top left-hand side, and then you're ready to go. As we proceed, we'll have some more vocabulary and some more talking prompts for students. When you get to this slide titled Fixed versus Flexible, please note that there are several ways to incorporate movement into this part of the lesson. One option would be to have students come up to the board and drag and drop each of the expenses into the correct category. Like so, you just click and drag. The other option you can do with students, it would be to have all students get up and stand in the center of the room. Then designate one side of the classroom as fixed and the other side of the classroom as flexible. Then read each of the prompts being the buttons at the bottom, such as the word clothing here. And then give students 3 to 5 seconds to choose the side of the classroom that they think is accurate. So is clothing a fixed expense or flexible expense? Give students a few seconds to move, tell them that they must make a choice, and then go over the answer. What I like to do is if all the students are standing over on one side, let's say it's fixed, I'm going to click and drag that option into fixed, and whether it's right or wrong, we can talk about the answer from there. You can see it bounced back to the center. Clothing is a flexible expense here. After that, I'm going to have all the students come back to the center before doing the next one, which would be fast food. Now, if you have students who are indecisive, or if you have a class that some are on the flexible side of the room, some are on the fixed side, before I reveal the answer, I like to ask students why they chose the side of the room that they did, and we can kind of get into that as a class and talk about why it's one or the other, and just talk with the students about what their thinking is. Now, let's say I'm running short on time. I hit submit, it says that's right. I can move through. If it doesn't let you move forward and you need to move forward, you can just go up to that menu button and select the next slide. That's kind of a workaround for that. As you continue, please continue to select option 3. You can see it's on this slide as well. So after I've talked about the topics on this slide, I'm going to click option 3 to move to the next section, which is a closer look at spending choices. And again, we're going to have some more vocabulary. And then when I get to this slide that's called Setting Priorities, the instructions say, go to your student activity, planning for my future income. We're not going to do that quite yet. We're actually going to go over the next slide as a class, and then we'll get into the activity. So we could just kind of bypass this slide, not a big deal. This slide, we're going to cover the order that we suggest students pay for their expenses in. It is a clickable slide. You can call on students if you have some students who would like to come up and select these for you, or you can do it yourself as you go through this slide. Now, the next activity is the 100% game, which is your second worksheet. It looks just like this. And then there's a couple ways that you can do this activity. So once you've handed this out to the entire class, I actually don't stay on this slide. I actually stay on this slide before, just because the next slide, the way that I implement this in the classroom is a little bit different than the guidebook. So you have a couple options for the 100% game. You can either do it just as it's written in the guidebook, which is totally fine. However, there is a second option. So what that second option is that the game can be played in 2 rounds. So the first time, which can be done at this point in the lesson, or if you want, it can be done sooner in the lesson, it's up to you, is what I do is I tell students to ignore the writing at the top of the page, which is the instructions and the percentages. I tell them to ignore it for now. We'll come back to it later. From there, I tell them their section totals for their fixed expenses. So that is section A, which is taxes and healthcare, and then section G, which is their savings. So I just give them the bare minimum. Here's what it is. And then from there, I tell students that they are moving out of their homes and they get to choose whatever they want from the menu for housing, food, transportation, clothing, cell phone, and entertainment. And I remind them that they can choose more than one option from several of these categories. I give students about 4 or 5 minutes to make their selections about what they would like from each category. And I tell them to add up the totals from each category and find their grand total at the end of the time. Then what I do is I ask a few students to share their totals. You will have students, especially if they're not reading the instructions at the top, you'll have students who underspend and students who overspend. So you just ask them generally like, what did you spend? Oh, wow, you spent $3,600. What did you spend it on? And somebody else maybe spent $1,000. Okay, what did you spend your money on? And I call in a couple students to share before I go into round 2. So they're going to do this activity again, but this time we're going to read the instructions at the top. That is also why I don't put the next slide on until the second round, because it does outline that the students now have a budget of $2,400 and they need to spend 100% of their income. So they must total $2,400. So now is the point where students start groaning because they've either grossly overspent their money or they've underspent. Some of the underspenders will get excited because, wow, I'm under budget. That's great. You have to remind them that now they need to go back and look at their budget and make choices so that they spend exactly $2,400. Sometimes for underspenders, that looks like maybe they're adding more to the saving category, or maybe they want a different apartment to live in or a house. For our overspenders, I'm encouraging them to go back and see the areas where they're overspending, but maybe it's more of a want than a need. And then I give students about 4 to 5 minutes to make those changes. And then I call on students to kind of share maybe what changes they had to make, which kind of goes along with the next slide about reflecting on the activity. So it really does help students see if they are naturally one that's going to overspend or underspend their money. And then why is it important to actually plan all of our income towards certain things? Because maybe we forget about saving. We think we have money, but we're spending it too much or forgetting to save. Why is it important to have a plan for the money that they are receiving and will be receiving in the next few years when they start their first jobs? From here, we're going to wrap up. You need to go to you're going to ignore this slide. It says work and career readiness. We didn't do that part of the lesson. We're actually going to move to the financial literacy big ideas. And we're going to just reiterate these points and remind students of our lesson objectives that we read in the beginning. And we're going to reflect a little bit. These are some nice prompts to kind of wrap the lesson up and kind of bring the point home for students. From here, if this is part of your JA in a day or JA in an AM program, please continue to the next lesson as it's described in your instructions. Consider allowing students a quick stretch break while you get the next lesson pulled up and ready to go. If this is your only lesson of the day and you have more lessons to teach at a later date, please make sure to collect student name tags as they will be reused for the next lesson. And with that brings us to a close of this lesson for planning for your future income.